My name is Annette DiLorenzo Thayer. I'm a third-generation dealer, third-generation American. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was as beautiful as it is today, it was back then. I was a gymnast, a competitive gymnast at an elite level until I was 15. I started swimming competitively at age 9 and continued through high school. I was a state champion in the medley relay. Started running track in high school. I was a state champion in long jump and 4x1 100-meter relay. And then I went to college at UNM, and I was a 4-year letterman. And I actually was a conference champ in triple jump my senior year, and held a team title, a WAC champion, in 1988. I started working right after I graduated. After the WAC meet and after a last chance to nationals meet for NC2As. My dad basically said, "It's time for you to pay your dues," and threw me into sales. It was like baptism by fire in the car business. I was the only woman on the floor and the youngest, and of course the boss's kid. So my dad was like, "Fend for yourself, you know, you're gonna have to learn this." And apparently the hard way. Within the first month, you know, it took me 2 weeks to sell my first car. And then after that, one of the senior sales people came up to me and said, "This ain't no place for a lady." And I just said, "Where's the lady?" Because I'm 20-some years old. I'm not a lady. Those are for proper ladies, proper women. For grandmas, right? Anyway, so I worked my way up through the business. I sold cars for a little over a year. I went into the office. I learned AR, AP, and did warranty, did a lot of inputting. I used to drag titles to MVD, the motor vehicle department, when you didn't have another option to go to, someplace on the corner to help you, or what we have now, which we can communicate straight with the state, and would sit for hours waiting to get titles processed. I worked in the service department. I eventually worked my way up to director of fixed operations, which entails overseeing parts and service. My cousin at the time was working the burial department, so he was working with the new and used vehicle sales departments. I did a lot more interaction with our office and finance side of it. When one of our general managers left to be a part of another company in Denver, my cousin and I took over as co-general managers of our Jeep Chrysler store. And that's when I was voted to be the president of the Albuquerque Auto Dealers Association. And then 4 years later, I was the chairman of the New Mexico Auto Dealers Association. And during that time, I got to meet all the dealers of the we had about 112 dealerships or brands represented in New Mexico. And I think we were the second largest private employer in the state as an industry, with over 8,000 employees in the franchise dealer network in New Mexico. I was nominated as the New Mexico Time Dealer of the Year by the state of New Mexico dealers. Eventually, down the road, a few years, I was also nominated and voted as director at the national level for NADA as the director from New Mexico. So my Grandpa D, he's the youngest of 9, so he was a first-generation American. And he worked for Santa Fe Motors and was their sales manager. And the owner asked him if he wanted to go into a partnership because they're going to have an open point down in Albuquerque for a Pontiac store. And so my grandfather did. And they moved into an old gas station, and it was called Chief Pontiac at the time, at 2nd and Fruit, which is now the parking lot of the Wells Fargo bank building downtown. And so he was there until they built the store at 1300 Lomas, which was across from Gallus Chevrolet, and which was the car row, back in the day, next to Frontier Ford and then the Dodge store, right in the middle. And he bought Mr. Wood out within 3 years, and he was the sole operator of what became Quality Pontiac at the time. Edmund DiLorenzo started it in 1957, my grandfather, and then my dad, Charles DiLorenzo, took over in the 80s from my grandfather. He and his brother started running the store, and then we bought the Chrysler Jeep store in 1986, and we just went from there. Well, my dad used to talk about his pop events, and we had this violin. So my great-grandfather worked in Italy on a cruise ship, and he played the violin. And he played it until he made enough money to take his wife and his 5 children at the time to Ellis Island. When they arrived at Ellis Island, according to my grandfather, our name was small d apostrophe. But when they were checking in, they said, our name's DiLorenzo. And they put D-I, 2 words. And my grandfather didn't question them because he's like, we're in, let's go. They kind of had this really interesting birth certificate. My mother-in-law loves genealogy, and she found this thing, and it listed Vincenzo DiLorenzo, and his, he spoke English, and then like his wife, they called her Mamie. She spoke some English, broken English. So they kind of really listed out what they were coming to America for. My great-grandfather got to New Mexico to help build the cathedral in Santa Fe. There's a plaque that still says, dedicated to the 4 Italian families that still live in the area, and it has our name on it. And so that's pretty cool. He was a mason and a painter. And that's how we got to New Mexico. My great-uncles worked in the mines up near Raton, and they're buried in the miners' cemetery up there in Dawson. So we can still go up there and check them out. So after he graduated from high school, he wanted to join the Navy, but he was only 17, and my grandparents wouldn't sign off. So he went up to Trinidad, Colorado, to the junior college there, and studied to be a mechanic, and came back and started working at the stores. He started, doing detail, doing, maintenance stuff. So he started in, he was a grunt like everybody else, or most everybody else, let's put it that way. So he started out as doing detail and maintenance work, and then, progressed as a more advanced technician. And then from there, he went and started to work in the parts department for a gentleman named Mr. Rossi. He was actually friends with his daughter, who babysat me, and he started at the parts counter and working parts. And I can remember they would call us in during inventory, because we were, little, but we could count. So we were able to count like screws and clips and stuff in the bins, and help them with inventory at the end of the year. So that was kind of fun. And then eventually, he became the parts manager. And after that, as Mr. Rossi went to controller, so he started running the back office, then he taught my dad how to do the books. And so my dad became the office manager and then eventually controller of the stores. So my mom, she is a second-generation American. My grandfather was barely born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And my grandma and grandpa came to New Mexico in 1957, ironically, moved to Albuquerque. After my grandfather was in the Army, he was a medic, and he worked at Kirtland Air Force Base during the war. And they had a bakery, And my grandfather's like, we got to move to Albuquerque. And my grandmother's like, nope. If we run this business for 2 years and you still want to go to Albuquerque, then we'll do it. So they had a bakery in West Dallas, and Liberace and his mom used to come into the bakery all the time and buy goods from them. And so my mom moved here when she was just getting into high school. So she had no friends, she didn't know anybody. And she met my dad at Frank's Drive-In, which is down on Lomas. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's still Frank's. And they met because that's where you went. You cruised around at the drive-in. And he asked her out. I think it was her junior year. And they dated for 3 years and got married. She actually worked for General Mills, and she was making more money than my dad was at the dealership. And so when she got pregnant and had me, she was still working. And my dad said, look, you know, I don't want you working. I will ask my dad for a raise, you know, and that's, I think, when he went to the parts department after that, so that she could stop working. We had one car. We didn't have a garage. My dad built like a cover, like a car park area. It was pretty fun. Well, we used to go on picnics in the mountains all the time, and that was the coolest thing because we never went out to dinner. There was hardly anywhere to go out to dinner anyway, but we got to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we'd get chicken, and then we'd go up to the hills, and we'd go, you know, either to like the Elks had this little picnic place, or, you know, the Wantabo picnic grounds, you know, up in the Sandias. My great-grandparents lived in Santa Fe, so we would go up to Santa Fe often and hang out there and do the same thing. My parents, we had friends that lived across the street from us, and they moved to Clovis, so we would go to Clovis every Memorial weekend. And, you know, we drove everywhere in the station wagon, of course, you know. We'd fight and argue in the back seat, my brother and I, and it'd be like, you look out your window, you look out your window. You know, we called Wantabo Roller Coaster Road. It was dirt road. There's probably dirt roads from Manal north, and Wyoming turned to dirt shortly past Manal growing up. Windrock was like this big thing back in the day. You know, it had a hotel, and then, you know, the mall, and then the thing that was so far away was Hoffmantown Plaza, you know, which is the corner of Wyoming and Manal right now. That was out of town. I mean, that was so far away. But we used to get in, my dad we'd go on these rides, right, to the top of the mountain to where the tram was, and we would go down Roller Coaster Road, and it was just this wavy dirt road, just up and down. It was a joyride, literally, to go. But there were only like just over 100,000 people, I think it was, when I was growing up here. And when it got to 200, we thought, oh my gosh, this city's booming. It was crazy. It was about your community. It was kind of surrounded by like your church situation or your businesses. You know, you'd have company picnics or church socials or fundraisers, you know, like the American Legion would have a pancake breakfast that we would show up at after, you know, church, or spaghetti dinners, you know, at the church, or, you know, trying to raise money for playgrounds and stuff. And we also were on swim teams, and those swim teams were like your summer family of kids from all over the city that you would have never met but for this pool. And, you know, I still have friendships from those days, and my parents still are friends with those parents. It was just, it was how you did things back then, and you carpooled, you know, to school. It was fun. When people ask me, New Mexico, I'm like, yes, one, I speak English. 2, I don't need a passport. I didn't need a passport. We are part of the 50 states. you should do some history lessons, go back to school. But the first thing that comes to mind is its natural beauty and the diversity of our state. You know, we have so many cultures, and it's so interesting. Everything about it is interesting. If you're really into the outdoors, then you've got a real special treat in coming to New Mexico, in my opinion. I think the melting pot idea, really, the communities that are from all over the state, you know, come to Albuquerque, and you know, we have, and Santa Fe, you know, we have the Indian Festival, and we have the wine festivals, and we have the chili festivals, and we have Albuquerque was a huge farming community before it developed into this big city. So there's a lot of farm to table, you know, restaurant stuff going on here. And then of course, you know, the traditional green chili, which makes us, you know, world renowned, on top of the balloon fiesta, the International Balloon Fiesta, which the car business was involved in that, there was a gentleman by the name of Ed Black. He owned a Chevy store who had a balloon. And the International Balloon Fiesta started out with 14 balloons in the parking lot of Coronado. So everything's just kind of grown through the traditions that New Mexico started. My grandfather started the Key Grab, which is an event at the Balloon Fiesta. And we would donate a car or put a car up as a prize. We had to get big insurance on it in case somebody won it. And for many years, they did not win it. And what we did is we put a pole in the middle of the main field, or wherever they were launching from that year. And we put a set of keys on top of the pole. They just sat there. They weren't taped, nothing. They could have blown off, it didn't matter. So we rested these keys on top of this pole. And the balloonists would go out. They had to go within a certain radius of the field, certain distance away, and they could launch from anywhere in the city, you know. And of course, they're masters of the weather, so you know they'd figure out where the wind was, where it's going to be, how it's going to be. So when they came into the field, if they missed the key, they could go back up into the classic Albuquerque box and come back and try again. And I can remember the first time that the car was won. That's exactly what happened. And the balloonist came in, went back up, and he had another opportunity to come in and pick up those keys, and he got it. And it was so cool because you're standing there, and instead of watching the balloons lift off and take off from the field, they're coming in over you. And you're just standing there watching all of these balloons, you know, having this chance to win this car. And then General Motors heard about it. And they're like, hey, we want to get in on that deal. We're going to provide the car, and we're going to bring some balloons, you know. So we had the big GM balloon, and we had the Cadillac balloon, and the Pontiac balloon at the time. So that was really fun, and that was, you know, that also gave us the opportunity to go up in a balloon for the first time, all of us. At some point over the next 4 or 5 years, we all got a ride. So gosh, in 2009, when the financial crisis hit, you know, I went back to Washington to beg our senators and congressmen to help, you know, with these OEMs trying to go bankrupt, you know, to support, you know, their efforts not to do that, because, you know, people in New Mexico would suffer, you know, jobs would be lost. And on my way home from asking Congress to, you know, help, I landed in Denver and got a phone call and was told that basically we had lost 50% of our business overnight. They shut down the Pontiac brand, and they terminated our dealer agreement with Chrysler Jeep. And 200 people basically at our stores were looking at just devastation. I couldn't believe it. You know, I just couldn't believe it. There were 10 other dealers in this state that lost, some of them lost everything. You know, 10 dealers, 10 dealerships with, like I said, who employed the best paying jobs in some of their communities. You know, the Raton dealer lost all of his business. The Clovis dealer lost his business. The dealer in Deming lost his business. It was, these communities are supported by these dealerships with these good paying jobs that can't be replaced, you know? So overnight, we lost 50% of the employees that the franchise dealerships employed just in the bankruptcies during the gas crisis and the Great Recession. Some people recovered, others didn't. It was very scary. And I know quality, we did everything we could. We'd lost 50% of our employees just through attrition. We didn't fire anybody. We said, if you want to continue to work, if you want to stay, you know, please do. We're not firing you. And it was hard. It was scary. And we picked up our bootstraps and we soldiered on. And when the opportunity came for us to fight for our stores back, we did. And we were one of 28 dealers who got their store back. However, we won the battle, but lost the war because another dealership was put in place, and our franchise laws in New Mexico forbade us to open another store. It was just too close, you know. So anyway, we were lucky to pick up another brand, and the rest is history. Our communities, small business is really important to our communities because we're not a giant state. We don't have a Denver. We don't have a Phoenix. We don't have a huge tax base. We have a lot of agriculture and gas, and New Mexico is spread out. So these little communities need, you know, family businesses to help support them and their children, and their schools. And the franchise car system in New Mexico does that for our state. Outside influences from other states trying to implement laws that don't support New Mexican communities. You know, big business like publicly owned companies that come in and they don't provide stable jobs, contracted jobs. They don't support the community. They don't provide the benefits, and they don't sponsor your little league team. They're not sponsoring your school choral group. They're not sponsoring band or the symphony. But your small dealers, your small businesses, family businesses, locally owned businesses support your quality. We're a family business. We're a family-owned business. And, you know, when there's a problem, when you call, you get a person almost every time, unless, you know, if there's circumstances where people are busy, you know, there are other customers in front of them and can't pick up the phone. But usually there's an owner on site, or there's an owner in town, and you can actually talk to the person who started that business if you've got a problem, or if you've got something nice to say about how they run the company or how their employees treat their customers. So you're not calling an 800 number and trying to get a hold of somebody either in another country or another state. You know, we're part of the community. You know, we support, you know, your church, your grandchild's baseball team, your other grandchild's swim team. You know, we're in the community, and we're supporting that both by our dollars and also by our participation, you know, in building, you know, projects, helping, you know, pick up trash. You know, we have these projects that we do with our companies, with our employees, with our families, And that's the benefit of a franchise dealer and knowing somebody, having a family business in your communities.